Lobby Days, the first and only platform that automates the setup and administration of your lobby day at the Capitol, so you can focus on what matters during session. Learn more at lobbydaysmedia.com or stop by our booth at TribFest.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Dara Lind. I'm a senior reporter at Vox.com. And on behalf of the Texas Tribune, I am delighted to welcome you to the 8th annual Texas Tribune Festival and to this panel, Dreams of the Dreamers. Quick logistical stuff. We will have time for Q&A toward the end of the panel. There are going to be microphones in the audience. I am hoping that this is going to be an opportunity to to center our panelists, who are three the Dream.us scholarship recipients and Dreamers of DACA recipients themselves. And so my questions, and I hope that yours as well, are going to be with the sensitivity that the issue requires. If I need to step in and end fights, I will, but I don't think that this crowd is going to be throwing any punches. So as long as this is a less contentious atmosphere than yesterday's Senate Judiciary Committee hearing in DC, I think we'll all consider this a good day. If you want to tweet, the hashtag is #TribFest18. Oh, that's no longer back here, but it was. Please do silence your phones, however, so that we can not have a disrupted atmosphere. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce each of our panelists and then kind of have them introduce themselves at more length by telling their kind of personal stories. But I'm here with, from left to right, Edras Alvarado, who is a DACA and Dream.us recipient, who is a sophomore at the University of Houston studying management information systems, focusing on the intersection of business and technology. He was 6 when he and his family came from Honduras. In the middle, we have Maria Trevino-Rodriguez, a DACA and the Dream.us recipient who is pursuing a dual political science and sociology degree at the University of Houston. She has worked on gubernatorial, congressional, and county-wide political campaigns and came with her family from Mexico when she was 1. And closest to me is Emelin Hernandez, a DACA and the Dream.us recipient who is a graduate of the University of Texas Rio Grande, was one of 3 women to graduate with a mechanical engineering degree and is currently pursuing her master's degree and came to the States when she was 9 years old. So Eddie, if I could put you on the spot to kind of go first, and I would, each of you, as I joked with you kind of in the green room, is pretty used to telling the story of how you got here, and I'm hoping that you can kind of share that with our audience, and then we can get into a little more of what it's been like to be a person who's seen their kind of future in the news a bunch over the last 2 years.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned, I came here at the age of 6, right? And was, most of this, I wasn't really aware of like the whole situation for me. Didn't really become too involved in it until I guess high school, whenever I realized, hey, I want to go to college, but I can't because finding scholarships, and it's became like a lot harder for me, and I had that realization, how much harder it was for me just because of my status. And, also at that point, that's when DACA came out, I went ahead and actually gave me that motivation to actually go and study, because before then, you could get your degree, but at the end of the day, it was going to be for nothing. You couldn't get a job. You wouldn't have to be able to use that degree. So DACA came along, gave me that motivation, gave me the, drive to actually go and pursue a degree. So now that that's being put in danger again, it kind of makes me reflect on my options now, because now any future possibility of me having a life here is kind of put in, I might not be able to have that possibility now.
And you weren't eligible to apply for DACA when it first came out, right?
No, I was too young, yeah.
So but that was kind of something that you could then aspire to?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of was nerve-wracking because the whole process was, it's like a long process, but it was a good 2 years before I could actually apply for it. So having that to wait that time, it's also kind of like, with the uncertainty of the whole situation, it adds a little bit of, you know, makes me nervous, because it made me nervous at the time because I didn't know how long that was gonna be there available for me. And I know for a fact there's still like others who are in that situation that I feared that I was gonna be in, where they weren't eligible then, and now they missed out on the opportunity.
When did you decide to come out as undocumented and start talking about it?
Because since we live in Texas, you know, it's very conservative. I was always kind of hesitant towards it because I had that fear of being rejected or being judged or being harassed because of it. So I honestly, I didn't really share that information about myself until basically I started getting involved with the Dream.us, and they started started inviting me to events, starting to tell my stories so that, you know, I could, you know, people can hear from us directly and see what our experience is like.
Maria, I'd like to welcome you back to TribFest. Can I put you on the spot and ask you to tell the audience what happened the last time you were here 4 years ago?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. This is my second time at the Texas Tribune Festival. My first time, I was a social media correspondent with the New Politics Forum at the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life at the University of Texas, Austin. At that time, I had just gotten off of a campaign, or actually I was working on a campaign, gubernatorial campaign that year was 2014, and I came particularly to listen to the speakers because I had just graduated from high school in 2013 and I wanted to get more politically involved because I found out that I was undocumented while applying for colleges and universities. I had assumed that I was a Texas resident because I had resided in Texas my entire life, which was a mistake. And not until I started to apply for college, I found out that my tax ID number was not my social security number, and that I could not get the kind of loans that I needed in order to go to the colleges that I had been admitted to. So I came to the Texas Tribune Festival, and I was really interested in going to a panel discussion that was about dreamers. And at that time, Gabby Pacheco, who is the director of the Dream.us, was on the panel speaking about the undocumented experience, along with people that now I recognize because they're running for Congress. Veronica Escobar was on that panel, and so was George Rodriguez, who is the South Texas coordinator for the Texas Tea Party. And I'll never forget his name because we share a last name. My last name is Trevino-Rodriguez. And at that time, he had been calling my parents criminals. And when I came up, it was Q&A time, and I had been, you know, just extremely upset by the way that he had been talking about my family and my community. He called my sister an anchor baby. And I was just really emotional, and I came up, and it was the first time that in front of a large group of people I had come out and told them that I was undocumented, but I felt the need to so that he understood who he was talking to and that he had been talking about me without knowing that I was listening. And I came up to him and I told him, how could you feel comfortable? And it's still on C-SPAN, so I watched it over again the other day. It was a whirlwind, but I was very emotional and I started to cry. And I told him that I was upset because he had called my family and my parents criminals for trying to bring me to the US for a better life, and that I was upset because we had shared ancestry. If we shared a last name, we both came from similar places. And I couldn't believe that he was talking about his own people that way. And he told me, well, okay, you're not technically a criminal, your parents are, and you were contraband. And I just started to weep in front of him. And still talking about it makes me shake a little because the dehumanization that happens within our communities, when you call somebody like me or Emelin or Eddie contraband, you're completely stripping us from who we actually are, which is children that came to the US because of the fact that our political climates in our countries are terrible. We had different issues going on in Mexico, which are caused by US policies. And my families felt that they had to come in order for me to have a better public education system, et cetera. And this just feels like a 360 life moment for me to actually be on a panel talking about Dreamers. And I'm just very happy to know that the Texas Tribune is providing us a platform, right, to speak about our own experiences rather than providing a platform for folks who just hear, very negative rhetoric about people like me and are just, regurgitating it and don't necessarily know about the life issues that we face. So thank you so much for having me.
Emily, could you talk a little bit about kind of what brought you to this stage, kind of your story and how you kind of went from coming to the U.S. to kind of to being a Dream.US scholarship recipient?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Like Dara mentioned, I did come here when I was 9 years old, and I still remember the date, which was December 26, 2005, so day after Christmas. And we started a new year here. So new year, new life, literally. I mean, I still remember the whole trip, and it didn't hit me until I was in high school. Like she mentioned that I started applying and I was looking for scholarships because, like every American child that wants to go to college, I wanted to graduate debt-free. So I kept seeing that they needed Social Security, you needed to be either a U.S. resident or a citizen. So I thought, oh, I live in the United States, I'm a U.S. resident. But, it wasn't actually until I had my junior conference with my counselor and my mom that she told her that the position we were in and that that was going to dwindle my chances of either going to college, excuse me, getting any help at all. But I mean, it's still a little bit difficult to really announce myself that I'm a DACA recipient because of, like Eddie mentioned, the conservatism here in Texas. But I mean, I do live in the Rio Grande Valley, and it's, I could say 95% or maybe even 99% of Mexican people and Hispanics. So I mean, down there, they are a little bit tolerant, more than I would guess up here, because this is my first time in Austin. But I mean, even down there, it is a little bit rough living so close to the border, and also hearing in the news about all of these raids, either 30 minutes away from my home. But once I learned about the Dream.US, I did work pretty hard throughout my whole high school career. I didn't let just a little piece of paper tell me, you can't do this, you can't do that. I mean, sure, I knew I couldn't do some stuff, but that didn't really bring me down, because either ways, I know that, the United States, people come to it because of a better life, and I'm kind of keeping it on the positive, where maybe down the line I will have a better life with maybe being a resident or a U.S. citizen. So this status that I have, I don't let it bring me down. I just try to do whatever I can, at whatever speed I can, and I don't let it hold me back at all.
It's really interesting to kind of hear the story that Emily, that you and Maria have told about, like not even knowing about your status until college is something that is very common, as among people in your cohort. The sociologist Roberto Gonzalez at Harvard, who wrote the book Lives in Limbo about this kind of dreamer generation, calls it the transition to illegality, and like the kind of understanding, and that in pre-DACA times often kind of resulted in what Eddie, you were talking about, in like kind of demotivation. And was having DACA as an option something that that, because I guess that would have occurred, you would have become eligible for that at the same time, right? So was that, having that option, something that made it easier to kind of deal with that realization, or did it take a while to kind for
for my family in particular, the fact that DACA became a program didn't really affect me until I found a way to be able to pay for DACA. The pay is, I think it's like $475. I don't have it memorized, but my family couldn't afford that. My mom and dad are both undocumented, so the only way that they really could survive is that my mom's an artist and my dad would sell his art. And there's no way that I ever had $475 to spare. And so not until I went to a particular info session where they were offering scholarships for DACA did that actually become a possibility for me and my family. And I know that a majority of undocumented people are still in that same boat where regardless of whether there is DACA, there's still that economic barrier that doesn't allow us to actually reach the opportunity of receiving that kind of status. And I mean, once I received DACA, it felt a lot better to have that program, but still we know that it's a Band-Aid solution. I'm only protected for 2 more years. So more than anything, I find DACA as a tool than an actual, reality for me. And at the same time, as you know, the news just continuously makes DACA, a political volleyball, right? To see where it's going to end up. Is it actually going to be a program, a policy, or is it going to be ended because of the fact that folks still disagree with it? But yeah.
Yeah, like she mentioned, actually, I think DACA came in when I was barely entering as a freshman. And I couldn't really apply to it because of the economic barrier. So I ended up applying at the end of my, I want to say, junior year. So I got it just in time before my senior year. So as I was applying, they were asking for Social Security and all that. And I was able to put it in because I had just recently got it in. But, I mean, it did take about 3 years for me to actually get it. And then again, I do have 2 little sisters that are also in the same position as me. And then, I mean, once I went into college, we started saving up, and we wanted to get the DACA for them both. But then the news came that no new recipients were going to be accepted. So I was the only one that was able to get that opportunity out of my whole family.
And to add to that, for Texas being the second state with the most DACA recipients, it kind of really hurts to see that they're the ones leading the charge to basically kick us out, get all of our rights taken away again. And it's just upsetting.
Yeah, I was hoping to ask about that a little more. What do you guys, in what way do you think of yourselves as Texans, and how does the state government's attitude toward DACA, where they've obviously, literally, they led the charge to stop the expansion of it in 2014, and appear to have tried to successfully pressure the Trump administration to rescind it in September of 2017, and are now trying to sue to stop it after other lawsuits have resulted in people continue to be able to renew. Given all of that, how does that affect your identity as Texans?
I still consider myself a Texan because, as I said, I came here when I was 1 year old. I've been living in Houston, Texas for a majority of my life. And so I consider myself a Texan, but that doesn't take away the fact that many people do not accept me as a Texan. This last Texas legislative session, I was, fighting against SB 4, which would affect my family, both of my parents particularly, because they drive in order to be able to help my sister go to school, etc. And while I was speaking in front of the committee that was going to be hearing folks, I had to stay until about 1 a.m. because there were so many folks who were interested in speaking and sharing their stories. And while I was speaking, nobody was listening, right? So I was speaking to deaf ears. The committee members wouldn't look me in the face. They were on their computers or on their phones. So I think I consider myself Texan. Texas sometimes considers folks like me Texan. We have a law that started in 2001 under Governor Rick Perry that allows us in-state tuition. if we graduate from Texas high schools. So depending on the administration, we're Texan. But at the end of the day, I feel like we need to elect folks who see Texans as who they are, which are, people who have lived here their entire lives, who pay towards, our public school system, and who at the end of the day live and breathe Texas and may just not, have the paperwork to actually fully be a quote unquote Texan. So whether you like it or not, I'm a Texan.
How did it feel on September 5th when when Jeff Sessions came out and announced that they were going to end DACA, and kind of the details came out about new people being unable to apply for the program and their attempt to phase out the renewal system?
Well, felt like, that I had to make a fresh start. As you're going through life, you make all your plans. You're like, okay, I'm 2 years from getting my degree. I'm gonna save up for a house, or I'm gonna save up for something. I'm gonna start going to interviews to get a job. But as soon as that was announced, you're like, okay, maybe I can do all that. I have to go and start from scratch, start making other plans, because there's a good possibility I might not be able to do that here. The U.S. won't give me the opportunity to do that here. So it felt just like, part of your life is just kind of chipped away.
What other plans were you making?
Well, I mean, I'm already working a job, and all those people that I met so far throughout that, it's kind of a lot to take in, to say that all of these connections, all of these people that I met, that, they love me as a person just for that. But if they knew I was DACA recipient, I don't know if they would still be there supporting me, offering me the job that they've already offered me. Being there, it's just stressful to figure out what else I'm gonna do from now on, because all the possibilities that I had might just be dwindled now.
Yeah, like Eddie mentioned, that day I was in school, so I had my phone away, so I wasn't really keeping up with the news, what was going on. But I knew something was happening because my phone started buzzing like crazy during class, and it was just a couple of my friends who actually knew of my documented status, and they were sending me links of what was going on. So once I got out of class, it just hit me like a ton of bricks, knowing that something that was part of my future, because I was a sophomore when that happened in college, that part of my future was put on hold. So I didn't know if I was going to be able to apply to any internships. I didn't know if maybe by tomorrow I was going to have a job. It was just very hard, not only for me, but for my family as well, because, like I said, we were just planning on getting the DACA paperwork for my little sisters, and well, it just didn't affect me, it affected them as well, and all the other people that were barely that got their money together or anything like that to actually get it.
I was really mad on September 5th. I had already known that this program could leave any minute and could just be disintegrated depending on how Congress felt. However, I felt like a rush to push my school. I go to the University of Houston to create policies within our school that protect undocumented people. I asked the university administration to create spaces that did not allow immigration and customs enforcement to enter. So all student housing, the clinics, the psychiatric centers, to make sure that undocumented students could at least feel safe within some space on campus. I asked them to create a scholarship so that undocumented students can continue to go to school regardless of whether or not they could afford it anymore, if they were paying for their own schooling. That also was tough. At the end of the day, the only people who really listened to us was the Student Government Association, and you know how much power they have. It's practically as much as any bureaucrat, none. And so, you know, it continues to be a struggle because we have to find institutional support when at the end of the day we could be creating policies that help everyone, right? And so rather than creating something that can at the end of the day help Texas's economy, Texas's culture, our communities, we're creating policies that hinder folks from being able to contribute. And so we had to go over to the local level and make sure that our sheriff, you know, wasn't coordinating with ICE and making sure that folks who didn't deserve to get deported weren't getting deported simply because they didn't have an ID on them or because they, you know, forgot to turn on their blinkers. We had to make sure that the university campuses were supporting their students to make sure that no student had to no longer pursue their education simply because they no longer had, you know, DACA and that economic support that they once had. And at the end of the day, those were all also, you know, Band-Aid solutions because undocumented people could always fall through the cracks and always end up doing so. And so I just felt that we needed to do more local organizing rather than national organizing to protect folks. But at the same time, it's just so tough to get people on board, and not everyone's interest is in the undocumented community simply because, you know, many of us are fearful to bring it up, our status, and we also just, it's hard to ask for help, you know? I feel like many times undocumented people are put in a position where they have to be resilient and they have to be strong and they have to be comfortable enough to share their really personal stories and traumatic experiences. And it's like, we should be putting that kind of responsibility on folks who have the means to do so, who have, you know, the time where they're not working multiple jobs in order to take care of their families. And so that's why I started doing this, because at the end of the day, this fight isn't for us. We're technically privileged. We go to college. This is for our parents, right? This is for the people who are considered criminals because they wanted a better life for their children. And so I would just say that we need more allies to do the work and to be on the front lines, because you're literally tearing us down.
Thank you for kind of bringing us there, because I did want to ask, how closely were you guys following the fight in Congress, you know, over the last, in the several months following that? And if you were in Congress, would you have backed any of the deals that were getting, you know, the various kind of compromises that were getting put together?
Absolutely not. We were using my parents as political chips to bargain with, and at the end of the day, you cannot do that, right? If you have empathy towards a dreamer, you should have empathy towards their parents. And I feel like a lot of times, I honestly don't think this is an immigration issue. I think it's a racial issue. I think that we see that our population as a country is shifting and that people are afraid. And I think we need to make this, you know, more, we need to change the story to also, you know, humanize our parents, not just us. Because I feel like every time I see a positive story about a dreamer, I see their parents behind them. And that's just not being told. That story is not being told enough.
And just to kind of spell this out for an audience that might not have been following the minutiae in Congress, some of the bills that were getting, various proposals or bills that were floated would have either legalized dreamers but prevented their parents from being able to get US citizenship through them ever, or would have engaged in future big changes to the legal immigration system, specifically family-based immigration, in ways that would have ended up making it much harder for people to generally petition for their parents to get US citizenship. So in those particular ways, it did kind of end up being a legalization for dreamers on the backs of their parents. And while obviously it didn't look like Congress wasn't ending up doing anything anyway, that was something in the background that a lot of immigrant groups were raising to the attention of both Democrats and Republicans.
And an increase in enforcement.
Yeah.
So even if they were deciding that they weren't going to be giving them status, they were going to be actively prosecuting people like my parents for driving and for doing everyday things that many people get to do on a regular basis that shouldn't be questioned.
I know that that Maria, you and Eddie have both renewed your DACA pretty recently. Emelin, I don't know where you kind of are in that cycle, but since the program is kind of shambling along zombie style, with federal court in January ordered the Trump administration to start accepting renewals again. The lawsuit led by Texas to stop that from happening did not get the favorable ruling that they were hoping for at the district court level. So right now, it kind of looks like the fight is going to go to the Supreme Court probably late in this current term, if I had to guess. So because that, is literally as Eddie, as you were mentioning, the future of the validity of your work permits is kind of up in the air and to a court's discretion. How did you guys end up making the decision to renew when you did, and how does that, does that feel like a burden off your shoulders at all, or is it still kind of hanging over you?
I mean, it's always hanging over you because, it's only 2 years. 2 years goes by quick. But, so, the decision was made last September, and I knew my permit was coming up for renewal until it's February next year. So whenever they made that decision, they had originally said, oh, we're only taking renewals for people whose permits are expiring on March. So I was like, oh, well, I'm out to dry. So, they went ahead in January and reinstated for renewals. So that kind of pressure had me pressure to try to renew as soon as possible. And especially since the timeline that they kind of want you to renew is 3 to 5 months. I wanted to do that as soon as possible because of the fact that, all the uncertainty behind it. And I actually went ahead and submitted my renewal application on the week that Texas brought up the lawsuit against the program. So it was very hectic and stressful knowing that I submitted today, but then tomorrow they're gonna be like, oh, well, no one can do anything anymore. So that was very fun. But, I just got the renewal confirmation, so it took some weight off me for the next 2 years, but it's still gonna come back around, and it's not a permanent solution. And then it's a more anxiety that I'm gonna have to deal with next year and a half.
I immediately renewed my DACA as soon as I could, just because I knew that, like Eddie said, any minute somebody could, either start a lawsuit or just decide that it was going to be scrapped and that it wasn't going to be a program anymore. And so, yes, it gives me a little bit of I can breathe a little bit knowing that for the next 2 years, I'm semi-protected. But again, like Eddie said, 2 years goes by so quickly. And, after those 2 years, what is next? What is going to happen? Especially with, if the Supreme Court is going to listen to it, then today's arguments against Brett Kavanaugh are even more important to us, right? Because if we know his background is of making decisions that are not ethical and that are not moral, how can I expect him to ever side with me and with my people and humanize folks like me? If he can't even humanize me as a woman, how is he going to humanize me as an immigrant? So I just, I'm watching that very carefully.
That week when the news came out that they were gonna remove any new applications, I actually got scared because I had actually submitted one 4 months before. So, I was keeping up with the status of it online. And by August, it had said that they had accepted my renewal. So that was a weight lifted off my shoulders, but you know, I still had to wait for the card. And I actually got the card, my new card, on August 31st or 30th, either or. So, I mean, literally 5 days later, this news hits. Then it actually hits me that this might be my last chance at actually working. You know, I just have 2 more years of it. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And it was actually a year before graduating from college. So, you know, double whammy right there. I didn't know if maybe I was going to be able to finish my career in college, if maybe I was going to be able to actually work in the industry. So it was pretty scary. And then I'm also kind of mad that the lawsuit was brought up from someone down in the valley where I'm from. So I live in Westaco, but it was a judge from Brownsville that brought it up. So it's literally 40 minutes away from me. Close by the beach also. So, I mean, somebody from your own backyard is doing this to you rather than helping you. And then also, I mean, down there in the valley, like I said, it's either 95 or 99% Hispanic people. So, you know, at least around 30-40% of the people down there are undocumented. So, I mean, somebody doing that to you, another Texan, another person from the valley, it just didn't make any sense to me, because I mean, we're all people, we're all supposed to be helping each other. And like I said, somebody doing this to you is just unbelievable.
So, like, nightmare scenario, the Supreme Court, like, somehow spins, you know, tomorrow comes out with something saying, oh, this case has gotten escalated to us and we are now allowing the administration to, like, stop processing renewals. What, like, if something like that were to happen, if, you know, like, things got shut down, what do you guys, like, what would you do? What's the plan B?
Well, I mean, plan B right now, I still have family over in Mexico, but, like, I've lived more over in the U.S. now than in Mexico. So I actually consider the United States more my home. But, I mean, if this kind of stuff did happen, that I'd actually have to go back to my own country. I mean, it'd be bittersweet. One, because I'm actually leaving my home. But, I mean, at the same time, I am going back to my home, you know? But, I mean, all my future plans are on this side, not on the other side. But, I mean, with family over there, but also the uncertainty of whether there's going to be shootings or well, not having security over on the other side is also pretty frightful.
My plan B has been the same plan B that I've always had. It's to continue to locally do work and to continue to try to elect candidates who are knowledgeable about the immigrant experience and who can make a difference, whether it be statewide, locally, like city and countywide, or even federally. I think if federally and nationally we have issues, we can always create policies in like your city or in your county that to some extent can protect immigrants. California does a great job of this. And so I'm pretty sure that there are ways and things that we could be fighting for that will, at the end of the day, you know, require us to be extremely, you know, witty and out of the box, but we have to do something. We can't let everyone, you know, all 11 million people suffer. Houston is supposed to be known for its diversity. It is literally a hub for immigrants. We would have no slogan if it weren't for immigrants and people like me living in Houston. So, I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, we need to do something, and we need to, you know, inform our communities more about these issues. We need to really have folks step up to the plate and to do more work alongside undocumented folks. You know, tweeting and Facebooking is great. It works sometimes, but we really need you locally organizing with your, you know, groups that are doing this work, because at the end of the day, we need all hands on deck, and we cannot continue to, you know, fear for our lives. And like I've been here since I was 1 year old. I am a Texan. I'm a Houstonian, and although Mexico is beautiful, I hope to be there on travel one day. I live in Houston, and I'm not going to stop living in Houston unless I decide that I want to move somewhere because I simply want to. I refuse to be, you know, told that I cannot live in a space simply because folks disagree with how I came to the U.S. My parents applied for residency when we came here, and it takes about 25 or 26 years to get in line. So I've been in line, and I'm going to continue to stay in line, and there's no way I'm getting out of that line because I can't. So I'm just going to continue to tell folks about my story and hopefully empower more people like us to really bring on people who are at least empathetic to the humanity of undocumented folks.
So my plan B, you know, I'm really thankful for the Dream US for this, is they are allowing me to pursue my education. So plan B for me is no matter what happens, no matter if I lose my rights tomorrow, I'll continue my education, I'll pursue my degree, because at the end of the day, as long as I have that, I have so many more doors open to me. It'll, like Maria said, you know, I've lived here for so long, I don't know any other place that I can call home. So for me, just being able the opportunity to continue my degree, I know someday I'm gonna have the opportunity to actually be able to do something with it, to be able to actually be a productive member of society. Because for us as DACA recipients, we don't get any benefits from the government. We don't get any, we can't apply for any federal government program, and all we give back is we give our tax money, because we all work as DACA recipients. We give you know, the $500 fee that we pay every 2 years to renew the program. So that's, if you count that with, like, I think it's 700,000, each paying 500 every 2 years, how much money are we giving to the government for them to just toss us under the rug again?
So best case scenario, somehow magically you get like a naturalization certificate in the mail tomorrow. Like, what do you do then?
I thought about that.
Throw a party, probably. I think I would love to run for office one day. I know I can't be president because I wasn't born here. Cough Ted Cruz, but I would just love to. I feel like we continue to elect folks who are knowledgeable about our issues, but we don't actually elect people into office who are living through the issues. I would love to see some Black trans women in office one day. I would love to see, you know, a previously undocumented person in office one day. I would love to see, you know, people who have always been kept in the shadows speaking on behalf of the communities that they should be able to speak on behalf of. When I go to the Texas legislature, I don't see anybody being spoken on behalf of other than other middle-aged, well-off white men. And at the end of the day, that's why our voices aren't being heard. They're not people who know what our experiences are like. They're not people who are in our communities actively working. You know, they're people who may have a fancy degree, but at the end of the day, all they know is theory, right? They don't know the actual social issues and implications that all the policies that their, you know, staff writes for them actually mean and what they do. So I would just like to, you know, empower more people of color to run for office, especially here in Texas. You know, we're 40% Latino. We do not have 40% of the Texas legislature. We do not have enough, you know, women in the Texas legislature. We do not have enough Black women in the Texas legislature. We have no trans people in the Texas legislature. I would just like to see that as diverse as our state actually is. So I would just work towards that like crazy.
I mean, with this best case scenario, I guess, one could say that we might try to take it easy because as a dreamer, we do have to give literally 120% because we have to look for extra opportunities out there. But that's not really in our nature to take it easy. So, so, I mean, I would finally be able to, I mean, I guess you could say come out of the shadows, not live in fear or wake up in the morning wondering, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Am I going to be able to finish this semester in college? I mean, with this best case scenario, an enormous weight would be lifted off of our shoulders. And then, I mean, now with this kind of opportunity, we'd be able to get even more opportunities, like Maria said, to actually maybe run for office or maybe even going back to our hometown to actually visit our family that we haven't seen for such a long time. Just little things that other folks take for granted, basically.
Best case scenario, it'd be such a weight lifted off our shoulders, but I don't think it ends there because, we as dreamers are the ones that are looked upon as the good immigrants. And it's not just us, I feel like, especially with this administration, with the current political climate, there's just painting immigrants as being drug dealers who come from Mexico or coming here to join a gang. And it's like, that's not even probably the 1% of immigrants, but they just all bunch us up into this little one scenario where that's why you see all these people being so afraid of immigrants. And, there's gotta be some social progress, some social work that we have to do to change that rhetoric, because it's not just that. It's not all of us are coming here to do that. It's the majority of people who come here are coming here because they want a better life. They want to have their kids go to school. They want them to just be able to, walk across the street without being felt like they're in danger.
And I would just like to say that citizenship is not our end goal. There are so many black men who are citizens of this country and whose citizenship is not taken seriously. I feel like at the end of the day, even if we become residents or citizens, we need to fight to make sure that that actually means something, and that we're always on the front lines of, helping other folks out, whether they're citizens or not, whether we consider them quote unquote criminals and felons or not, simply because, I'm very pale, but a lot of people, just because of the color of their skin, I've seen get deported accidentally because they look Latino or they look Hispanic. So that's not the say-all, be-all. It would protect us individually, but there's still, like Eddie said, that same culture of hate and of just divisiveness that we need to get over.
So we do have a bit of time for Q&A. We have volunteers with microphones, so if you could wait for the microphone to come to you before asking a question, then I'm going to be repeating it anyway. If the lady with the glasses over on this side of the aisle. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So I found it interesting that two of you didn't know that you were undocumented until pretty late in life, or at least that seems pretty late to me, not know something, that important. Was it more like your family was keeping that information from you, or is it just more like a conversation you just never had? And were you upset that you didn't have that conversation earlier?
I mean, it's not that, well, in my case, it's not that they didn't tell me. I kind of knew, but it just wasn't something that I thought would affect me as much as it did. Because I thought, oh, I'd lived over here for so many years, I do well in school, I just thought that by doing this well in school, I would actually get the opportunities. But, I mean, I do wish my parents would have told me, like, straight on, because I kind of figured it out on my own. And then they also did tell me, like, you got to be careful once I hit high school that, I mean, they didn't say how I'm going to say it, but it basically sounded that way, that not to get my hopes up. So I mean, they still wanted me to be the best that I can be, but I mean, the way things were, I guess they just didn't want to see me upset over not having as many opportunities or maybe just going to college or anything like that. But I do wish they would have told me sooner that, okay, this might happen, you know, so brace yourself. That way I wouldn't, not really gotten my hopes up, but at least so that I knew that there might be a few more roadblocks in the way.
It just never came up for me and my family. We were never sitting on it, like, you know, eating dinner, and I never asked them, hey, am I a citizen, by the way? It's just not a conversation that you usually have. I didn't find out until I started applying for scholarships in schools, and it just wasn't, it never comes up really. I never blamed my parents for it. I completely understood, you know, why it is that they came here and why it is that we ended up in Houston once, you know, the whole story was told to me, but I never once, you know, blamed them for anything, and I guess I never asked.
With the sunglasses on the head in the center section.
Hi, thank you all for being here and telling your stories. They're stories that need to be heard. I work in higher education, and I think all three of you spoke about the importance of education in your lives. I know the admissions process for all students is very difficult, and especially even more difficult for people in your situation. What are some things universities and institutions of higher education can do to better support dreamers?
Thank you for asking. I can send you a list.
I will happily give you a business card. I would love a list.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. First of all, outreaching to high schools and making sure that you tell students that they don't have to be documented in order to apply for your school. Providing a list of scholarships for undocumented students. Making sure that there are, like I said previously, safe spaces for undocumented students where, you know, technically there's already spaces on campus where immigration and customs enforcement can't be there. It's like medical spaces, but like housing, etc., you know, making sure that that happens. I'm also queer, so making sure, like, I started a program where different professors can post, you know, I'm an ally outside of their classrooms, just so that people know that they can speak to you and feel welcomed. But there are, you know, creating scholarships in your university that are primarily for undocumented students. At the University of Houston, when I brought that up, they were like, well, there are already scholarships, and you don't have to be a US citizen or a resident to get it. But the kind of competition can't be the same, right? If we're talking about equity and not equality, then we need programs that are specifically geared towards more marginalized communities like undocumented students. There's a website, I can't remember it, but it's literally like steps that your school can take to become an ally to undocumented students, and I'm happy to meet with you afterwards and give you some info.
So some of the stuff that I can think of and something that I experienced recently, I recently attended a career fair for my, it was like on a school assignment, and you know, they gave us a list of like 180 companies that were going to show up to the career fair to recruit you because you guys are amazing students. But then you go through all of them, and then only out of those 180, it was only 3 that were willing to even get in the table and talk to you because you were not a U.S. citizen. So that's something that I feel like, you know, you as a university is something that you can work on with companies to try to also, you know, give us those opportunities, because for us, we're always kind of getting the short end of the stick on stuff like that.
I mean, I think we can start as early maybe as middle school or high school, just to inform students that even though you are undocumented or you have DACA, there are still opportunities out there. There was an instance that when I was in college, I met up with a friend that actually went to University of Houston, and she had a friend in our high school that was about to graduate, and he didn't have any plans, and turned out because he was undocumented. So what happened was that she informed him, of my situation, just to let them know, like, hey, you can actually do this, because we aren't really informed during high school that we can or we can't. So unless you actually tell your counselor specifically, look, I'm in this situation. Is there anything that can happen that can help me, that you can help me with, or anything like that? Because I mean, in the high schools, with my experience, I don't think they were handled very well because they weren't that informed. So basically, it just comes down to information. I mean, to have, at least, like Maria said, information regarding scholarships, regarding safe centers. Like recently in my university, they just opened up a dream center and they're holding workshops. So students, faculty, or anybody that wants from the community, they can become an ally with them. So, I mean, stuff is getting done, but it's getting done slowly, and I think it's because of the information that they are lacking.
Hi, I hear you guys, we see you guys. I just wanted you to know that I was adopted. My parents came over years ago under a completely different process, and they were able to come in freely without repercussions. I live in a very protected society, in a very protected community, and I want you to know that we are all here for you, that we hear you, we see you. We're having difficult conversations with anybody that we can. We're knocking on doors, we're making phone calls, we're having phone call parties, and do not give up. We will continue to have those uncomfortable conversations with anybody and everybody that will listen. And you're unbelievably important. And don't ever feel like you're not. So keep working. Is there, my daughter is skipping school today to be here. She's 17. She can't wait to vote. Is there anything that we can do that you feel like will help us get in touch with our next generation to empower them deeper?
I think this brings up also what you can do on university campuses, right? Hosting panel discussions like this on campuses where different students, even high school students, right, can hear the experience of undocumented folks and better understand the situation. Because I think a lot of times we put the responsibility on students and on youth to inform themselves when we can be creating the spaces for them to get informed, right? So I would say, you know, making sure that you are providing opportunities for information to be shared, especially to millennials. And, you know, I feel like many times we say, you know, youth aren't voting, they're not active enough, but anyone I've seen organizing has been a youth, like has been young. So maybe you're just not in the right social circles, but but we're doing stuff and we're taking up a lot of the work and we're doing the work. So I would just say to make sure that if you are doing the work, that you're creating spaces where you're empowering younger folks as well. Because I've been in a lot of spaces where, you know, people just feel, oh, they're a high school student, they can't speak enough on this issue, or oh, they're a college student, they don't have enough information, and we aren't given the space to even give that kind of conversation or to even express what kind of information we have. So don't underestimate the youth and just give them the opportunity to speak up and to go up the scale.
Ooh, that's an excellent varsity jacket. I'm not just calling on you because the jacket is awesome, but the jacket is awesome.
Thank you. So my name is Olabumi Oni. I come with the Eras Polaris Press. And I have a lot of friends who are undocumented, and we are all applying for college. And I'm asking what I can do as an ally to help them through that process, and what I can maybe talk to my college counselor about to give them more resources and things like that. Because we do try to stay informed, but there are just things that only people in your situation can know about.
I would say to help them look for scholarships. It is so time consuming to find scholarships that actually cater to undocumented people. And so helping them do that kind of search. If you go to a school in a particular community, maybe finding you know, scholarships that would maybe create a scholarship online Google Doc that you can share with everyone in your high school. so that you're not necessarily pointing out who the undocumented people are, but it's just being shared and the undocumented people will fall upon it. In addition to that, hosting, essay writing maybe after school so that teachers who are allies to undocumented people can check their applications and help them and support them. Finding a list of schools that provide already support within the school for undocumented people, and just starting that kind of culture, right? Maybe like an undocumented ally day on campus where everybody don't wear a safety pin, but maybe like a monarch butterfly or something that everyone can see that, people don't come out usually, right? They don't feel comfortable saying that they're undocumented, but if they see people are supporting them around campus, it already provides them, a sense of security. And so you don't have to necessarily, out anyone, but everyone else can feel like a more positive campus.
With that, we do have to wrap up. Thank you very much to the Tribune for hosting this. Thank you to Lobby Days for underwriting this panel. Thanks to the Green.us, and thanks to our panelists.